Okay, it's the home stretch, folks. Somebody before said, I think it was Alison, I'm between you and coffee. I am between you and wine. So I trump you, Alison, and life is a competition. Okay, so before I invite the panel up, I just wanted to give you a little bit of framing. Someone did say to me at dinner last night, fancy them thinking you were going to facilitate the panel, Helen, and not do all the talking. So be warned, I have a few opinions. So there's been a couple of themes that's come out of today. I made some reasonably extensive notes in preparation for being here. And one of those seems to be a One Health, One Welfare Te Ao Māori theme or framework that's been threaded through a number of talks. And I really like what Hayley said about it. She said, I don't really want to talk about One Health or One Welfare because the Te Ao Māori, or an Indigenous view for the people who are not New Zealanders amongst us, is really where it's at, right? That's been a very long-standing thing. It's been around for much longer than One Health or One Welfare, and it is all about the interconnectedness of everything on our planet, all of which is supported by Papa Tuanuku, Mother Earth. Thank you to her. So I'm going to frame up that. I want to pull out a few key messages from some of the talks today. I want to invite some audience participation because it's 4:15 and we're all a bit tired, and so I'm going to make you do exercises and jump up and down a bit. I've got a little surprise for you, Anya. We're then actually going to have the panel, so this is just the warm-up, and there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions from the audience. So telling you that now, because that isn't in the program, possibly. You know, if we did happen to run out of things to talk about, I thought questions might be useful. But actually, I think what's really helpful in these situations is to hear from you after we've done some intro and then get some more feedback. There's been lots going around, so don't let me down on the questions team. Okay, that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to close. So, bearing in mind what Hayley said, that's the framework. I love this idea about interconnectedness, and I guess my first question is this something that the audience is engaged with? Do we think the welfare of people, animals, and the planet is a thing? Hands up if you're a no. Okay, good. Was there one over there? Did I see? That's the trouble table over there, I can see. I think they might have been moving here or something. So that's good. We've got a unanimous agreement on that. My next question is, 1 being bad, 5 being great, 3 being the middle, you're all smart people, how well are we doing at that? How well do we live our lives? How well do we implement policy, regulation? How well are we engaging with animals using a One Welfare or One Health framework? So who's a 5? Who thinks we do a great job at that? Another unanimous decision. Okay, I'm going to go to the other end. Who thinks we do a poor job of that? Who thinks it's a 1? A couple of punters here. 1 punter, actually. So 3, you don't get 2s and 4s, by the way, so you have to pick 1. Sorry. Oh, okay, all right. Okay. All right. Oh, geez. Okay, I quit. I'm making the rules here, team, not you. All right, okay, go on. Who's a 2? 3, 4. Okay, so we've got no 4s, no 5s, 2 wins, then 3, and then 1. Right. So I think that's probably pretty fair, based on a very robust scientific study that we just did. We'll see how we feel about this at the end. So it's a contentious statement, right? Pets have no place in tomorrow's society. I was also thinking at this time of the day it could be a bit of a curveball. Everyone's been, tired, and now there's this contentious statement that's been put up, so thank you very much, Cans, for throwing that one. I'm sure we can have a very civil conversation about it. So if we just go back very quickly through a couple of things, I'm not going to summarise everybody's, but there were some things that really stood out to me. And the reason I want to frame this is because in order to have a useful conversation about that statement that's been put up, I think we have to agree that we're going to frame it within that One Health, One Welfare framework, right? Because if we're just going to talk about, I'm assuming there probably isn't anyone in the room that doesn't think there's value in having animals in our lives and therefore they should be in our future. But the world's just not that simple, right? We've just heard about a whole bunch of from a whole bunch of different people around different aspects of sustainability and how we live. Right, good. Give me another 5. I said we make the rules up as we go along. Okay, so Orla spoke about 69% of millennials would choose to buy organic products for their animals, to feed their animals if they could. That's great. However, we need to then ask ourselves the question, is organics actually the best thing for the planet? Right? So there are some I got some faces there when I said that, because that's not a straightforward answer, right? So we've got regenerative agriculture, we've got conventional agriculture, we've got organics, etc. What we need to do is understand what we need in various systems to, in my view, have the lightest environmental impact. So it's not necessarily just about going organic. We need to have a deeper conversation about that. Christine talked about, I'm not going to sing the song, can I just say, but there was too much, too little, too late, advocacy at the top and rescue at the bottom, and the impacts and the cost, and this was a theme that came through in a lot of talks about how much rescue goes on and the cost of that to people. So compassion fatigue, someone else brought that up. I think that might have been you, Jess, talking about dealing with your angry dogs. So there's a cost there to the people around what we're doing, but of course we need to do it for the animals. How do you balance those two things? What's the cost to the planet around doing the procedures? So desexing, for example, and I'm sorry, I forget who brought up about anaesthetic gases and the materials used in that. So there's a cost there to the planet. Christine also, she worked in the public health space, which I thought was interesting as far as already being the connection between human health and animal welfare. Madeline talked about rehoming due to the cost of living crisis. Now, if we think about where that's come from, we're not going to wade into a geopolitical economic crisis conversation here, but the comment was made around, or worse, the effect of this, the impacts of the cost of living on different socioeconomic groups and what that means for companion animal guardians. And later on, social justice was talked about by Alexandra. I'm going to come back to what she said because I was sitting next to someone when we were talking about feeding dog straps, and they were going, no. I'm like, interesting. Do you think there is going to be a future where we feed scraps rather than kibble? But somebody else, and I made notes, I can't quite find it, also talked about the equity or the inequity in the system around where people are, what their lives look like, and therefore how they can compare, look after their animals. It was a common theme as well. There was a lot of talk about the lack of regulation in the companion animal space, and there was also some talk about specific aspects of law and regulation, like Section 4 of the Animal Welfare Act, Section 11, the obligations, sentience in the Act. All these things have got nothing to do with this conversation right now that I'm having, other than to say I love policy and law, and thank you for bringing them up. So that made my heart sing. 30% of the food in the US is wasted, right? So here's an impact that we need to start thinking about in this broader conversation about how we keep animals. Did you know if food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd biggest country in the world for the amount of greenhouse gas that it produces? And yet we've got starving people on the other hand, you know, like these inequities and injustices are significant. Another one that really stuck out to me, because I have some views about energy in the world, which is another conversation we don't have time to go into, but hit me up over dinner. Short story, there is no such thing as a renewable economy. Contentious, come and see me. But innovation and disruption, love it. It's been happening since forever. That's how we got here. But the cost of those to the environment is enormous, right? So most of those are technologies, and in those technologies are rare earth minerals. And I don't know if any of you have seen where cobalt comes from, but it ain't pretty. So there's some really significant challenges around even thinking about how we might innovate or disrupt into the future. And also when blockchain came up, I had sort of jerky moments going, God, here we go, something I really don't understand and can't get my head around. You did a good job at explaining it, Sarah, wherever you are. Yeah. And Sarah went on to say that the key point is ethical consideration. And I agree with that statement. My challenge around that is that it's got to be a full life cycle analysis. That ethical decision making has to be based on the entire life cycle of whatever it is we're talking about. Okay, so those are some highlights. That's the framing I want to have this conversation about having companion animals in tomorrow's society. There was one other person that spoke, and there were lots of people, and I apologise if I didn't pull out a key point from your talk. But the Minister started off this morning, and to quote, because I wrote it down, he said, "We have a world-leading animal welfare system, and I am committed to keep it." And I went, bloody yahoo, this is excellent. Because he's... Because for those of you who don't know, he's trying to repeal livestock exports, the ban that the Labour government put in place. So that's a QR code that will take you to the petition that all of the animal welfare organisations that are working collaboratively, I practice that word too, to try and stop that repeal. That's the petition we'd all like you to sign, and please share. So John Hellstrom has sponsored it. He used to be the CBO at MPI, and he was involved in and around the export industry for a long period of time. Apologies to Companion Animals NZ. They had no idea they were going to be hijacked by a piece of advocacy work, but I figure use your platform, Helen, while you were here. Also, can I just say, why am I not seeing you all pull your phones out and take a picture of the bloody QR code? I've made it so easy. Oh, right. Oh, question. Who's already signed it? Oh, right, I should see a lot of other phones then. Come on, team. Yeah, we will be checking later on, checking your history to know that you've gone there. Okay, with that is the intro. So this has nothing to do with it, other than it's a terrible idea because it's bad. The diesel and the effluent going into the water, not to mention the animals. Okay, but moving on. We're going to have Catalina, Susan, Hayley, Orla, and Madeline up on the stage, please, to start this conversation. Probably a good time to point out that they have no idea what they've just stepped into. We have not had a conversation about how this panel is going to go, and they may be feeling slightly anxious now that they've seen I don't play by the rules. Not at all. Okay, a little bit more audience participation. So, the question we are here to have, the topic is that companion animals have no place in tomorrow's society. So you get a yes, no, or an abstain vote. So in the audience, now bearing in mind, well, let's do this two ways. So just from an animal's perspective, hopefully animals and humans, there might be some mutual benefits there. But just from that perspective in the meantime, so ignoring the one health, one welfare, Tal Māori view of things, just from this simple perspective, who thinks that yes, there is a place for animals in our future? Wow, that's a surprise. Okay, so I'm just going to take that as unanimous. I noticed that you didn't vote here. Did you vote? Okay, all right. I've got eyes in the back of my head. So that's probably not surprising. From a One Health perspective, who thinks animals have a place in our future? Interesting. It's a lot more tentative though, right? So you can have a yes, no, or a maybe. So that was the yes. Do you want to do this again? Who's a yes? A firm yes. Okay. Who's a maybe? Who doesn't want to who wants to abstain and make the decision later on? Everyone else, obviously, because you didn't vote. All right. Panel. So it's your turn. Starting with you, Hayley. You need to be a yes, a no, or an abstain, and I want 2 minutes with 3 key points about why.
I thought
just
I liked you, Helen.
Roughly based on that sort of.
Animals have been part of our evolution, and I don't think we can exist without them. So we do need to do a better job of integration. So we're integrated. Now we've sort of separated in a lot of aspects of the work that we do, but we definitely need to have some better integration. So that's why I voted 1 for the One Health, One Welfare approach, because I feel that we are definitely not self-aware, and we certainly work with blinkers on, and we do not understand the consequences of a lot of our actions. So, thank you very much, Helen.
Is it animals or pets?
It is companion animals, yeah.
So do companion animals have a place in our future?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it was interesting what you said actually when you started introducing all of this, which was, I think you said, I'm sure everyone in the room thinks, we benefit from our interaction with animals and therefore they ought to have a place in our future. Now, to me, that's a backward way of looking at it. I think when we're considering whether animals, I think we ought to rephrase the question so it's not, do animals, companion animals, have a place in our future, but should we continue to interact with animals in a companion role? And my answer to that, I'm an ethicist, not a welfarist, would be yes, it would be reasonable to do so, providing that we can adequately meet their welfare needs. And in fact, one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment is the incoherence of public thought about human use of non-human animals. And I think that argument is actually the same for all uses, so I don't think there's anything any different about whether we're using an animal in competition or as a companion or in laboratory medicine or in some of the support dog roles we were talking about earlier. I think from an ethical point of view, should we be doing that thing? The answer for me is always that we should only be doing it if we know, based in the welfare science, that we can meet their welfare needs and give them a good life. And if we know, based in the welfare science, that we can't, then with the possible exception of medical research, then I don't think we should be using them probably.
Okay, so now can you repeat the question? I think my brain is very tired of this.
There's not many rules, Orla, to be honest. No. So yes, no, or abstain. Will companion animals have a place in our future? And then some key reasons for, and I just encourage you again to think about it from a one health, one welfare perspective. So trying to balance all of those needs, so people, humans, and the people, animals, and the planet.
So I'm a definite yes for having companion animals in our future. I think it's a symbiotic situation in that we as humans benefit so much from our contact with animals, and if we do things properly, they benefit also. From a One Health, now again, repeat that question, or just let me think about this. We've a huge amount of progress to make to do things to a level that justifies our continuing to use animals in all capacities. So, not sure if that answers it. So I'm very undecided.
You can be an abstain in the meantime, if you like.
Yeah, I might be an abstain in the meantime. Need some time to think about that.
I do have down here, ask the question again at the end, so you can you can vote again.
Oh, but that's as good as I can come up with at this stage in the afternoon.
Great.
I'm an emphatic yes. I think if the world was in a place where it wasn't possible to keep companion animals, it wouldn't be possible for humans to keep existing either. I think animals are often the canary in the coal mine for us, that we can see problems in society through what's happening with animals really clearly. And I really like the First Nations views that there's no one welfare, one health, that they're just part of us and we're part of them. And in that way, I can't explain it, but those of you who've grown up with a dog or with other animals, they teach you things that humans can't teach you. Every animal I've lived closely with has taught me a lesson at that time I needed to learn. And I think if companion animals weren't around, there would be a whole lot that we would be missing.
I'm not going to ask you to repeat the question. So I try to do it. I think, yes, definitely a yes for me as well. And I agree with most of the points that already been made, but I would like to add something else that I think we already did make quite an improvement with taking care of the welfare of our companion animals as well, in the sense of the health, One Health and One Welfare scope. Particularly because I think when there is so much attention and also critics about how we care for our animals or manage our animals at this moment, that the people who do have these animals and do work with the animals are forced to think really good and really well how to do it. So I think that already is one win for both parties. And to add to that, and I don't think it has come up very often this afternoon, but I think to educate more people how to recognize certain signals of the animal, both positive and negative ones, that should be one of the major things we should work on in the next future.
Great. Okay, so we've got one abstain and essentially yeses. I'm an abstain too, actually. Not that I meant to have an opinion, but of course I do. So perhaps an interesting follow-on from that question is then, if that is to be the case, and we acknowledge that there is a cost to an impact on the environment for in keeping companion animals or having them in our lives, and lots of different ways. So there's been the conversation about food today, but there's lots of other things too. So in New Zealand, the conversation about keeping cats safe and happy at home, to protect our taonga species and keep our cats safe. There's impacts of toxo on our farmed animals and our Maori's dolphin. So there's a whole bunch of different impacts outside the immediate sustainability impact that we might think of. I remember reading a bit in the paper around the amount of urine, therefore urea nitrate, getting deposited in some UK park because of all the dogs that went and peed there, and it was worse than your average intensive dairy farm in New Zealand, can I just say. It was like, it's a significant challenge. What do we do about that? It's not good when it runs into our waterways. So if there was one thing that we could do to reduce impact overall, what might that be? I'm not going to start with you this time, Hayley. I'm going to go to Susan. or it can be who would like to answer the question. The only answer that's not possible is no one.
I'll get it over with first in case anybody else has to say much. This probably isn't the most significant, but it's the one that struck me this morning. I stopped eating meat a long time ago, but I've been feeding my dog food, meat-based dog food, all of these years. And I just discovered today that 20% of the meat and fish produced is used in dog food. So that to me is a massive impact that we're having without, I wasn't aware of it, I've never come across that figure before. So if that was something that could be done differently, if we could feed our dogs without having to produce meat and fish and decimate the fish supplies around the world to feed our pets for our pleasure, that's something that I think needs to be looked at and publicised and addressed.
May I ask then what you do think you ought to be feeding your dog? I think it's a really complicated question. So, first of all, some of the, I'm not an expert in this area at all, but from the little I've read, lab-produced meat for humans, and I've no reason to think it would be different for animals, has a significant environmental cost, actually, as you said. So that is not a great panacea that we ought to be doing. Obviously, feeding scraps has significant biosecurity implications. We've all just come out of a pandemic, hopefully. And then, if we think about the animal and its welfare needs and its innate, what Bernard Rowland would have described as a telos, a dog and a cat in particular, they have carnivorous digestive tracts. They're not, they are designed to eat meat. So to a certain extent, who are we ethically to be saying, well, actually, no, you're going to eat a vegetarian diet? I'm not convinced by that.
I don't know the answer.
Which I wrote it on my piece of paper today, and this has come up a number of times, and I always like to go and talk to veterinary nursing students or whoever else will listen and have this conversation about Hairy McCleary. So New Zealanders in the room, I'm assuming everybody knows, and I'm getting some Australians know, people who don't know about Hairy McCleary. Very famous children's storybook series, and Hairy McCleary basically runs around having the best life of, that a dog could have. So he's not kept at home. He gathers his mates, Muffin McClay, like a bundle of hay, in bottomley pots all covered in spots, and chases Scarface Claw and gets into the rubbish, and it's a bloody great life, right? None of which is appropriate or how we expect dogs to exist within our very, human-centric world. So there's this, what... I agree with what you've just said about the food, like what should we or ought we or can we do versus what do they want, and then think, well, that's just a nuance, right, because we control their whole lives. They're not allowed to run and jump and bark at the postman and bite the annoying person who comes through the gate. Like none of that's acceptable, and all of it's what they might want to do. So where's the balance?
Answer to that would be two wrongs don't make a right. So we were just discussing in the break about, actually I was quite surprised to hear about, how much dogs are on leads nowadays, because I have the privileged thing of living in the middle of the countryside. Actually, to me, that is a welfare issue. So I don't think you say, well, we've got them on lead, so we might as well feed them the wrong food. That's two wrongs, not making it right.
I like it how you put words in my mouth there, but I'll take it on board here. Yeah. Okay. So then, and it's a bit of a trick question, right? Because I don't actually think there are not single answers or solutions to these problems. Those of you who know me know I love to talk about wicked problems, and this is absolutely a wicked problem, big, huge, interconnected, and there is no one thing that you can do to fix it. It needs responses. We need to be getting all of the stakeholders together, sit down, have a conversation, and say, let's start making movements towards whatever the thing is that we're seeking, that we're motivated to move towards. And I think this conversation fits into that. So here's another one, and this is going to be one of the other three that are going to have the first crack. So is part of the answer then, like humans, having less of us and less of them? How do we navigate that, answering and asking an open question? I've got you next.
What jumps into mind to me is being responsible about the breeds that we have. The struggle is real with, our boxes, and, you just look at this from a sustainability approach or concept, in that we're having to do a lot of work on these animals and they're actually not functional. So we do need to have some really good decisions around what we do allow from a breed perspective. Because working in emergency and critical care for many, many years, really sick of seeing these animals coming in and the owner's like going, oh, it snores, and it's like, actually, no, it's really struggling to exist. So we need to have some really good choices around breeds.
Mm-hmm. Everyone should have a greyhound.
We often forget, and this is something I often forget, that, for example, with dogs, the majority of dogs in our world are free-roaming dogs. Mm. They're not dogs that are kept in yards and look after them in our Western type of looking after them. And I think that whenever we have this kind of conversation, we need to have the Indigenous voice in the room to work out how can we use our limited resources and what should we be doing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So per feedback before, Madeline, around the way I framed the question, which was from a me perspective, this whole conversation is had from a Western privileged perspective, right? So, and yeah, we're also not the majority. So, yeah, it's a very fair point. Do you want to add to that, Catalina?
Do you have another question, or?
No, sure. Yep. So.
Some agency.
It's a very iterative, you can ask me questions too. Yep, that's how that's working out.
I will think about it.
So the loaded question I just asked about having less animals was for all of you out there who said, can we please have more regulation and a better animal welfare system? Yes, wouldn't that be great? Because it would actually contribute to this conversation too, right, around less impact on people and the environment, and less animals having compromised welfare. Okay, we can have another question, and I'm going to refer to one of the ones that you may have prepared earlier. So one of the questions that was proposed by the organising committee is pet keeping, I'm going to say I really hate the word pet, can we do companion animals? Like, is companion animal keeping at risk of losing its social licence?
It's an interesting one. When I saw the question, I think I would like to say no, I don't think we are at least not at a high risk. But we do need to take care and to be and to consider the ways we care for the animals and manage them. And as I said earlier, I think education, especially in recognizing signs of poor animal welfare or also good positive emotions, would be really helpful and would be at a priority area for me.
Does anyone else want to respond?
I think one area that, and again, we're all people that love pets, and probably most of you, like me, aren't often in a room with people that don't like pets and or companion animals and don't think people should have companion animals. But I think in urban environments, it's where we most clearly see, so the excellent talk around dog parks. These are contested areas. Public spaces in our increasingly crowded areas are very contested. And in Adelaide, we are incredibly lucky that we can take dogs onto our beaches, but I don't think we ever should take that for granted. So we need to keep our social licence with people that don't think we should have companion animals.
Somebody spoke about social licence and the cost of losing it and the cost of getting it back. I think it was that in the horse talk maybe? There's lots of research around that. Once you've lost it, an intangible, implicit agreement between a group and the public, because it's implicit and there's no real definition, we don't know what it is, how do you get it back, right? It costs a huge amount, so the key is to hang on to it in the first instance.
But those people you're talking about who don't think we should have companion animals, they don't think we should have companion animals because they see that as having a negative impact upon their own lives, right? Not because they worry about the animals. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, which is a very different way round of the social licence being at risk from other things, for example, the use of animals in competitive sport, when people are worrying about the animals. And this is what I was saying about the public are thinking quite incoherently about all of this at the moment. The public's not at all concerned about the effect on the animals of them being kept as companions, and they probably should be. Everyone in this room is, but it doesn't cross their minds. So there's no risk that way.
So I'm about to throw to the floor for a question, and they can be random. Could be related to this, could be anything else that you want to throw to the panel about the question, do pets have a place in tomorrow's society? The other thing sort of feeding into that conversation is how much conversation today there's been about human behaviour change, and I applaud you, everybody who brought it up, because as someone who didn't get brought up in the world of social sciences, it's taken me a little while to come around to realising that's where it's at. Having swapped teams, not really, they're both important, but it's just great to hear so many people talking about it, because that's the conversation we need to have in order to help people understand, all of this and what we need to do. And data, except for the 3% of us who are scientists who like data and it changes our minds, data doesn't change other people's minds. Logic bullying doesn't work. Okay. Go. Oh, okay. Here in the middle table. Ready?
Sure, everyone. Oh, God, I just went blank. Hang on. So would you agree that the reality is, no matter what we do or where we go, there's always going to be a split decision in whether there's going to be companion animals or not? Because you can only teach so many people, and only so many people will ever take in that information. And then so there's always going to be two sides no matter what we do. So would you agree to that? And if you didn't, why not?
I would certainly agree with that. And I think in any gathering that I've been in, conferences, educational facilities, we have gatherings of people who are very motivated to improve animal welfare. They're thinking about it. They're trying to find the best ways forward. They are the absolute minority in terms of the numbers of those populations. So the majority of people out there are not thinking about the problems, the questions that we're tossing around between us today. So, sorry, the second part of your question, did I? Okay, I do agree. Unfortunately.
Yeah, but to your point, this is sort of preaching to the converted, isn't it? And it's about how we get reach into those other communities that may not think that there is value in having these animals in our lives. Mm.
Does that matter? Not everybody wants children, and we live in a society where we kind of accept that.
I guess what I'm getting at is how do we change the majority perspective rather than keeping it at a... So at the moment and for the foreseeable future, what I see is it's always going to be two sides and it's always going to be even on both sides. How do we change it so that we have the majority in the way we think and the welfare and how we care about those people? Because all I see is there's always lots of talk and there's so much passion in creating a better space for animals in particular, but that's as far as we're going so far. How do we change that? How do we change it from talk to action?
Certainly what I found, like having worked in the veterinary profession and then going and working in the emergency management sector, I'm working with very different people who don't necessarily think about animals at all. But I can tell you that animals are the biggest issue that they have, but they just don't realise it. So what it has taken for me to realise is that I need to ask good questions and in a language that they understand. So it's finding out what their issues are, what the challenges are for them, then asking good questions around it. And then you actually change their minds rather quickly.
Thanks. I saw some other hands, yes?
Do you think that we have reached a saturation point when it comes to companion animals and the number of humans that are willing to bring them into their homes and their families? And if so, where do we go from here?
I've got some views on that. No, I'm here to extract the information from you.
No, I don't think we have reached the saturation point, especially once we now know so much more about the benefits it has for living together with companion animals. You don't need necessarily to be actively involved, but also passively watching animals. Even just watching animals can have a really good feeling for you. So I don't think we reached that.
I also don't think we've reached our full capacity, and I think it's a fluctuating level of saturation, and I think social media and world events drive numbers up, and we're going to see those sorts of influences again and again. But that won't be a help if the numbers of unscrupulously produced litters of pups, etc., continue to rise to meet those demands. So things may not necessarily change even if we have more people willing to take on and look after pets in a good fashion.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think the other thing we probably see also is that as people's lifestyles change, as more people move into urban environments, the type of companion animals they're looking for changes. And so we end up with what we variously call exotic or non-traditional companion animals being kept more as pets. And of course, for many of them, it is probably not possible to meet their welfare needs. So that's a real issue from my perspective.
Cool. I'm just aware, I'm going to take one more. This is so tricky picking. It's not you, Stephen, because you get to talk anyway. So, Jess. It was because you look so enthusiastic. If anyone wants to compete with Jess, you need to jump up and down and do some star jumps, and she might get bumped in the question.
I'll ask quickly. My question was, with our limited energy and resources, should we be pushing for legislation and regulation change, or should we be trying to change society, general public social norms? Do we allow social media to drive the change? Do we go straight to the government? Do you feel that there's a preference? I know we need both, but if we have our limited resources.
give a one-word answer on this, because it so happens I'm also involved with the Animal Welfare Committee, the government's Animal Welfare Committee at home there. And my view on this is, yes, we do need both, but there is absolutely no point in having more legislation and regulation unless you also have enforcement, and that also requires funding. But enforcement is the most important thing of everything.
I think that the power of social media is something we're never going to control. And when there are new platforms being developed that replace or take over, from the previous, from the older versions, so it's not something we're ever going to be able to. So I think regulation absolutely needs to try to keep pace with that. I'm not sure if it ever can. So sorry, that's a.
I'm a great believer in the carrot approach rather than the stick approach. The thing about regulations as well is that it's not just about bringing in regulations. I teach a course in animal management at the local council level to university students, mostly animal behaviour. And at the start of the course, I ask them about what they know about the Act in South Australia and what local council bylaws are, and they know virtually nothing. And these are people that have owned dogs and cats their whole lives. So the regulations are there, they just don't know them.
Cool. All right, I'm aware that we've come to the end of our time, so we will wrap up. I just say, Jess, that's like my favourite, that's, yes, great question. And I think it's both, right, but it needs to be the whole system that functions, and so you need the top-down, bottom-up. There's no point putting things in words if we're then going to create codes that undermine them, if it's in the Act. So there's a whole bunch of things to think through in there. And then secondly, we need a cross-party or multi-partisan approach so it doesn't get rolled back every time a new government comes in, because then we're wasting time and energy as well, which also has an impact on the environment. Okay, so thank you so much. I also thank you to Royal Canin for sponsoring this session, and not that this is in my remit, but thank you to Cairns for a wonderful day. Quite tired, but it's been brilliant, so thank you. Thank you very much. Good million.